Hello and welcome to the homework part of Chapter 2, Section 1. I'd like to do a few problems. There is a little bit of a problem in that I think a couple of people have different textbooks, and I'm not exactly sure when they made the switch, and I don't think it was particularly well orchestrated, and so I don't know if my answers will match or my questions will match. So if they don't, try to see if you can find them, and if they don't, send me an email just to let me know. But uh, there's no need to consider it a major issue. I mean, this is somewhat designed to help you work through this. It's not necessarily, that kind of stuff should help you. But at least send me an email, and that will be good. So the first one is just, finding formal versus informal logic fallacies. And essentially, what that means is, is this a fallacy that's essentially part of an inductive argument, and it's part of the content of it, where it's introducing things like irrelevant information, presumptions, etc., etc. Whereas formal fallacies are really fallacies that affect deductive arguments, and it has to do with the fact that the argument is not structured in a way that allows for it to be true. The form is messed up. So in determining the difference between formal and informal arguments, one quick way to do it is just, if you know if this sounds deductive versus inductive, then if it sounds deductive, it's probably formal, and if it's inductive, it's probably, or it should be, informal. So that's a real quick way to distinguish these. But second of all, we have to ask the question of, formal versus informal. The other thing to do is to think, is this something that is part of the form, the structure is messed up, or is it somehow within the content that it's somehow weak because it's introducing irrelevant information, or the information is just a weak inductive argument, etc. So let's start with the first one. I've pulled up number 2. The house fire started at several different locations on several different floors. There were traces of accelerants at those spots. The house was abandoned, and we surely must conclude that the house fire started from natural causes. Okay, first of all, this is an argument based upon different pieces of evidence, evidentiary reasoning, and evidentiary reasoning is always inductive. So we could probably just go ahead and say that this is an informal fallacy. We could probably just say that right off. But you might say, well, is that all I need? Well, the other thing to think about is that, there is no form to mess up on this. So it's clearly an informal fallacy. It's actually what we would call weak induction. All the evidence is actually pointing the opposite way. And so it's really a fallacy because it's sort of all the evidence points one way, but it's saying it's the opposite. Okay, all women are human beings. All men are human beings. Therefore, all women are men. Okay, now this uses, these all statements. So it's a categorical syllogism. All women are, all men are. It's two premises to one conclusion. It's attempting to be a categorical imperative, or a categorical syllogism. Sorry. And essentially, what we have is a deductive argument, but it is the form, because all women are human beings, and all men are human beings doesn't mean they are part of the same group. And so that makes it a formal fallacy. Now this one is pretty clearly the case that it's wrong, there's something wrong with this. But sometimes people get things like all wines are alcoholic, all wines are made from grapes, therefore all alcoholic beverages are made from grapes, or something like that. And that may be a little bit more confusing. That one actually isn't probably as good as I'd want. But essentially where the premise or the conclusion is true, it sometimes will throw you off more, but it's the same type of form. Alright, Terrell knows Marcus, Marcus knows Fergie, therefore Terrell must know Fergie. Okay? Now, what is this? Is this a deductive argument or is it an inductive argument? That would be a real quick question. If it's it's depending upon logic of relations, and logic of relations are attempting to be deductive. However, they're sort of leaving out the fact that knowing somebody isn't a reflexive uh, element, and so just because Terrell knows Marcus and Marcus knows Fergie doesn't mean that that is going to be, I'm sorry, transitive. It's not going to be a transitive relationship. Knowing one person doesn't. So I would say that this, because it's a deductive or simply is a formal fallacy. Robert gave a very cogent argument for funding the new space program, but I hate Robert, so I am against the new space program. Okay? Now in this case, it's essentially saying, it's not a problem with the form. There's no real structure in that way. It's an inductive argument, and essentially it's trying to say, look, I'm not trying to structure this in a way. I'm just saying I don't like Robert, so it's a bad program. And so it's trying to mislead you. It's introducing irrelevant information. Your hatred of Robert isn't relevant. And so this is an informal fallacy. So we label it as such. And then finally, number 10, I've known 3 Russians and every one of them played chess. I can only reasonably conclude that all Russians play chess. So this is sort of a generalization because 3 Russians, they play chess. I'm now concluding all Russians play chess. So that's informal fallacy because A, it is an inductive argument. Any generalization is inductive. But it's also the case that it's a weak inductive argument because the strength there just isn't there. Alright, so I basically did half of these for you. That's fine. You don't need to do a whole bunch of these. The key here is just to be able to tell, that this is sort of an inductive argument, and it's not so much in the form, it's something that is informal. It's something within the relevance of the fact parts, etc.